morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. I hope you had a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint, and I wanted to talk about the new champion that's coming up that's going to be part of a hybrid fusion. This is going to be one of my first hybrid fusions I'm ever going to participate in, but I did want to talk about his kit because I haven't done a breakdown video on him yet, as well as like what my thoughts are in terms of whether or not you should or shouldn't go for this champion. In addition to that, I'm going to talk about a previous, if history has taught us anything, is that we should learn from it. We'll look at a previous hybrid event fusion type style that may be close to what we could expect for the fusion going into Emic Trunk Heart. So, with that being said, let's take a look at his A1. His A1 is an attack one enemy, increase the value of all shield buffs on this champion by 25%. Also increases the value of any shield buffs on the ally with the lowest HP by 25%. This also scales up in terms of damage when you book them by 5 for each level. It is 4 books, and that's a little bit on the heavy side, but increasing the value of this of the shield to is not a bad option for sure. I believe that there was an announcement about him having a adjustment or some kind of change that clarifies that his HP shields will only go up to a certain increment, so that'll tell us in terms of like how we can expect in terms of breakdowns for him. In addition to that, he does have his A2. We're going to go ahead and move on. Vinequake at a 4-turn cooldown unbooked. With it being fully booked, it'll be a 3-turn cooldown. It attacks all enemies, places a shield on all allies equal to 30% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns, and then it decreases the cooldown of all ally skills except Emic himself by 1 turn. This is kind of a big deal, to be honest with you. So a 3-turn cooldown with a reset for everybody except himself. That's actually super valuable, and I'll explain why down the road once I get done reading the rest of this. So, Trunk Heart Sanctuary. Places an unkillable buff on all allies for 2 turns. This is the big one for everybody. Also places a taunt buff and a shield buff on this champion for 2 turns. The value of this shield is equal to 30% of this champion's max HP. It's on a 6-turn cooldown, which when fully booked will be 4-turn cooldown. Yeah, that's probably the biggest selling point. That's probably the biggest selling point that makes him so spicy. His entanglement, this is going to be an interesting one here, while attacked, or when attacked under a shield buff, has a 50% chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill on the attacker by 2 turns. Occurs once per attack. Whenever an ally's HP drops below 20%, increases the damage dealt by that ally by 20%. So, with that being said, he also tops it all off with a increase all ally HP by 30%. So that's a very interesting kit that he has, I think, for the most part. Would I go for this champion? Well, if I were a player that didn't have any type of unkillable champions for clan boss purposes, if you're trying to get into Ultra Nightmare territory or Nightmare territory, with the intent to go to Ultra Nightmare territory, if you don't have any champion that can enable you to do it, this guy is definitely the person. So, in terms of checklist for CB, great, phenomenal champion, right? If you already kind of have your answer for clan boss and you're already kind of like, throwing down in Demon Lord and you have like a 1-key Ultra Nightmare territory or you're pretty much there already, right? I would say that this guy's value goes down quite a bit. But that's not to say he may not be valuable in other areas. So, I was thinking about it myself, but like the value of a shield increase may be valuable for areas where you may use shields a lot. And some examples would be in terms of where are shields valuable at. I know that there's a boss in Doom Tower that you have value from using shields. I believe it's the Scared King. Correct me if I'm wrong. In addition to that, you also have taunt, which may be valuable for something like maybe Shoguns in terms of forcing the targeting for the Shogun's single target, enfeeblement, things of that sort. That might be some value there. Where else can we see some value in shields? Well, shields is very prominent in the PvP arena meta, so maybe somewhere down the lines where you need to keep someone like going and they go second style team, maybe this guy could enable that. So in terms of like some places where I see some value, in particular I do see CB as being like his biggest value. But I think that besides that, he has like some great value in other areas where shields are applicable, or where you can increase the value, where that value is exponential. So I think that right off the rip, Emic is going to be valuable in at least 2 places, which would be clan boss and then in particular PvP. Could he be useful anywhere else outside of those 2 areas? I would say like in terms of dungeons or things around those lines. If you need some way to kind of keep yourself going through like a prolonged fight or somewhere down the roads where shields are important, or maybe even the skill cooldown reset is like really valuable for your team, I actually could see some value there. Imagine in a world where like someone could benefit from utilizing multiple buffs as well as a skill reset for your team. The first thing that comes to mind is like a seer comp, right? Maybe you don't have a Kaimar and you're shooting for, you know, utilizing your Renegade. I could see maybe Vinquig being the second one that could give you that one extra turn so that you could cycle into your Seer's Karma Burn a little bit sooner. So there's value there, you know, when partnered with a Renegade to give that full reset that you need, right? In addition to that, he also provides shields, the taunts, and all that stuff, which can also be stripped and used for your way clear. So like there's some value there in terms of like maybe a potential team. Without going any further, I can't really say too much outside of his modifiers, but I do think this is a very, very unique champ. Now, the key thing is that we don't normally see void legendaries like that in terms of like fusions or whatnot. I think we normally see like Spirit, Force, or even Magic Affinity type champions. So to see a void legendary come out of the woodworks for a fusion type style of it, it's going to be a hybrid. I'm going to call it a hybrid of fusion for lack of better words. It's very, very unique, and I think that automatically gives incentive to maybe wanting to go for him. Now, if you already have Unkillable, like I said, he falls down tremendously in terms of value, but that's not to say he can't be useful everywhere else. Now, you may have to do some tinkering around and find some value for him, but I think that like his utility speaks volumes towards his contribution towards overall compositions, right? Now, with that being said, if he does so happen to have like a really, really strong multiplier on his A1 and his A2 that gives him a lot of damage output, you may see some mechanics or where he may be more of an aggressive type approach towards, you know, a fighting style. But I think true, most of his kit screens like support utility, so I think that's the idea of where we're gonna go. Now, where you would see him in terms of like the value of the clan boss terrain meta, you could see some changes where he would be interchangeable with champions that have a 4-turn cooldown, 2-turn duration, block damage, or unkillable champions. Would it be a direct translation over from a man-eater? I think yes and no. Yes, in the sense that he does provide the unkillable, and in terms of you know, on the cooldowns you're looking for, you know, normally a man-eater is partnered up with a Painkeeper, and it brings his cooldowns down into a 4-turn cooldown, which is basically already, you know, when fully booked, Emic is kind of already doing, right? But the caveat is that he doesn't provide, and this is where kind of lean no a little bit, is that he provides a little bit of the block, the unkillables is nice, but he doesn't have that block debuff like man-eater does. So you'd have to compensate for that so that affinity friendliness becomes a factor, and that's where you could see some changes that could or could not manipulate it. I was doing some tinkering in the clan boss calculator, and I think that the best way to kind of surmise is that he's a hybrid or the combination of Painkeeper and Man-eater brought together to bring a potential champion. So the way that I would look at it is that like there is some tweaking, but like in a 2-turn or 2-1 ratio type compositions, I think he would fit very, very well into it, and you have to make some adjustments, but I think you could see the value of him shoot up in that regard for like man-eater comps, or even in block damage comps. He works very, very well. I've already done some consensuses, and if there's an issue with like the cooldown of all skills from the A2 being a problem, you could just turn it off and you still have your unkillable, and that's the main goal you want. You want that achievable unkillable, and then you complement your damage to your DPS as well as any other areas you can get it from, right? And last but not least, but like on his own, could he actually hold up an unkillable team by himself? I think the answer is yes and no. So yes, if, and this is where it becomes a little bit more of a nuance. Yes, if you can get the A3 fully booked and the A2 partially booked. So when you look at like the comparison of something like a Helicath, who normally has the A3 to A3 is the exact same in comparison for Emic and whatnot. The shield side of things, which is where the A2s are going to be compared, they both can be booked down to a 3-turn cooldown, but the difference is that if they were both fully booked, Helicath wouldn't lose the shield because of the sole purpose that he's using block damage, right? Whereas Emic is using unkillable, so the shield would still be depleted as the second AoE would go on, like maybe if you were to plug and play him in like a solo Helicath comp. But if he was partially booked where he's on a 4-turn cooldown, you could put in or inject like a auto attack in between you're using your A3 and then using your A2, which will then allow you to basically put the A2 just before the stun goes up and you cover the stun damage, right? And then of course his A3 will be back up by the time you get to utilizing your unkillable buff for the AoE 1 and 2. So I think that would be definitely valuable, and I think you should definitely be cautious about that if you're looking to only use him by himself or if you're planning on using him with somebody else. So I think if you're using with other champions that are going to have like a composition that revolves around unkillable, like another block damage or another unkillable champion, then I think fully booking him is going to be fine. Whereas if you're running him by himself and this is all you got, you may want to be very, very careful with how you handle your books. And if you're unlucky, then you may need to consider some more options to get you through the last little bit, such as utilizing some stun target champions, you know, like using a Skull Crusher tether with him, or a Finchi or a Bushi or something like along those lines, or sorry, not Finchi, but Bushi, that could basically tank the stun as a negative affinity approach, and then you'd have it. But that would basically mean that intrinsically by himself, he wouldn't be able to keep your team unkillable. Affinity friendliness is kind of something else that's already external from his kit, so you'd have to find like a cleanser or a block debuff champion to further complement what you already have going on your team. So I think that makes this champion very, very good, right? I think that the fact that he opens the door for people to be able to do more unkillable stuff is automatically a W. But everywhere else, not too bad. Now, with that being said, I want to talk to you guys about maybe a way to look and review and take from history a way to prepare for this fusion. And one of the ones I found was like Lenothra was a hybrid fusion, and although there's a lot of ups and downs about how people perceive the value of this champion in general, that's not the focus of this. It's more so what did you have to do during this event? And basically the long and short of it is that they're going to do something very similar, where the whole premise of a traditional fusion, where you have to, you know, acquire the rares, develop the rares, bring them up into fuse them up into the epics, develop the epics, and then fuse them into the legendary champion, right? That bottom part for the rares is completely demolished. Instead, what you get is fragments. So it's kind of like a combination between traditional fusions and fragment fusions, where you get fragments to get the epics, and then you develop the epics to turn into the legendary. So basically cutting off that bottom portion of like rares and then making it fragment oriented is going to be a little bit more of the focus, right? And I think with that being said, I think the consensus is that it's going to be a little bit more focused towards not missing any particular event. So you have to be on top of it, right? And then in addition to that, the amount of resources you're going to have is going to be a little bit more focused. Now, since this is a Void Legendary, there's a lot of speculation, so we don't know for sure. But there's arguments that are saying that you should have potions for all the other different types of affinities, because you may get one of each. You know, it's going to be 4 epics. So maybe one, you know, one rare, or sorry, one epic that's going to be Force, Magic, Spirit, and then maybe even Void Affinity itself, so that you can fuse it up into the Void Legendary. So I would say that like a healthy contribution of what to expect is get what you need to be able to take one type of champion each. So like in terms of getting enough superior and greater potions for your epics, getting them all the way up to 5-star fully ascended is going to be important. And then in terms of like chicken requirements or food requirements, you're definitely going to want at least 16 to take in, you know, and basically bring up those epic champions to stage 5 or rank 5. So 16 rank 4 champions in the barrel, ready to go, and then you use that for that. So that's going to be like the potions and the chicken side of things, your food side of things. In terms of like energy, I mean, if you were planning on participating in this, you should already be saving up your silver, you should be saving up your gems, and basically ready to deploy whenever you start seeing some of these events. But it looks like it's going to be like daily events where you're going to see most of things that are going to be, you know, happening on par with each other. So you're going to want to make sure you stockpile and prepare ahead of time, right? And that's why it's key to look at it. But in average, you're pretty much going to have a consistent range of like maybe 2,200. If they go a little bit higher, then you may look at like 2,500 range. But I would say plus or minus or on par equal to what this number is, around the range of like 300 is probably like a good estimation. Now, as always, this is subject to change, and I have no definitive proof that the results are going to be higher or lower. But at the very least, you can start preparing and being cautious in terms of what you're looking for point allocation-wise. So you know, shards, I would not be spending any shards, even though there's a lot of incentives right now for, you know, pulling for Champ Chase. I know we got like the Ragash, Prince Kaimar events that are currently going on for Champion Chase tournaments. But if you're going for this fusion, your resources are pretty much on lockdown. So energy used, only what's inside your active energy at the moment. We know the X/Y, which should normally be like 130 when you max out. Whatever you have left in there, you would use that up and just use your regenerative energy. But you want to stay on top of like basically conserving anything you get from like your daily resets. Anything that would go to your storage, don't touch that. Your gems, don't touch that. All your stuff that you would use, pretty much you're just basically preparing. If you find yourself less than adequate amount of potions to get you through the event, maybe farming a little bit during these next couple days would be valuable. Or in particular, like looking into you know, developing some food in prep for these epics that you're going to be taking up so that you can get the legendary. That's going to be the idea. Do some of the groundwork now so that later down the road, while you're utilizing your reserve energy, you're only focusing on these like particular, you know, tournaments or events that you need to make sure you get the bang for your buck. And as always, I would say that it's important to make sure that if you want to be extra prepared, just so that you're not blindsided by anything, basically being over prepared is never a bad thing, because even if you don't use those resources, they'll be valuable for you at another time, right? But don't waste any resources that you have in reserve is basically the keywords I'm going to say. Any daily stuff that you get that goes to your active energy, of course, use that as you see fit. But the main thing is just prepare. And it looks like every single day you got something coming up. So what would I have as an expectation? I think that every single tournament or fusion type style event is going to come with at least one champion chase or summon rush style event. So I think shards are going to be very, very important to prepare for. I think that at least one event for every type of dungeon. So dragon, IG, Fire Knight, to name those, and Spider, of course. Being able to effectively farm at least at certain key stages. So like really good point allocation is good at stage 20 for the normal range. And I think as you get further into the game and you're progressing, I think pretty much you want to just sit in hard 10, right? That's the best bang for your buck in terms of like the best gear as well as the best efficiency. But with that being said, of course, you want to farm in the most better ranges. So I think in terms of hard, your next best breaking point is probably going to be around like 6. But of course, always take a considerate amount of like evaluation at your account to make sure that you're effective. If you can only farm at 20, do what you got to do at 20, right? And then, of course, silver is going to be another big key thing. When I was dealing with the artifact enhancement for the Newt fusion event that we just recently got out of, I tried to keep a minimum of like 15 mil per artifact enhancement event, and we had 3 of them. So as we continue to progress, and if you see like breathing room in between like your events where, you know, you've already double dipped into 2 events and you clear that out and you have like a day or 2 worth of not doing anything, that little daily regen energy you get, or the energy that goes to your active like slot inventory, you can use that to maybe recoup some of your silver, or maybe recoup some of your potions. So you like realize, oh man, I am going to be short because, you know, I don't have enough arcanes to cover all 4 of my epics that I'm going to do. Maybe you could jump into there and grab a little bit there, you know, at a very casual rate, at a very, you know, precise and analytical rate that'll give you basically what you're looking for in terms of getting your resources back if you were blindsided by something, but also, you know, without overexerting yourself so that you can still keep on tandem with like the event. And one thing I will say is that like most of the events are pretty on pace. So like as long as you're active from the get-go, and double dipping wherever you see feasible. Once we get a schedule, maybe I'll do a breakdown video for that. But you know, as long as you're staying on top of it, you won't be blindsided and you won't be like pressed for time. And that's always going to be the key thing when you're dealing with these type of events, is you got to stay on a certain trajectory or a certain pace for it. So a lot of times it's going to be very, very valuable for you to do things preemptively instead of reactively, right? But if you do find yourself in a place where you do have the luxury of having a little bit more excess energy, then, you know, always plan and accumulate resources based off of what you have needs-wise. And then, of course, if you have, like, things that you can maybe hold off on, like the Forge is a valuable asset where you can get, like, a lot of extra free gear, or gear that you would use to just sell and create some silver revenue. You know, like utilize every aspect of this game that you get some value in. Like Doom Tower is always going to be free keys that you get daily. You might as well keep progressing that and then farming up resources or crafting materials to make some materials, even if it's not good gear. Like particularly, right now we're in the Eternal Dragon event. Guardian gear is actually really, really good, but even every time you craft, it doesn't necessarily guarantee you're going to get like a substantial piece that's relevant for you, right? So if you decide that like, oh, well, I may not be in the ballpark of needing it right away, but I know I will need Guardian gear down the road. Maybe I can craft a couple pieces, and whatever's bad, I sell, and I'll net some gains there. And then whatever I do keep, I can save for a later date. Maybe for that Artifact Advancer event, you could start plussing up those pieces, right? So, you know, always utilize whatever's available to you, and try to keep the active regenerative resources on cooldown so that you can continue to gain, leading up all the way to the very last day, where the day before the fusion starts. And that's when you will start slowing it down and you're like, all right, I've done enough preparation, it's time to execute, right? So I would definitely look forward to it. Most fusion events or like summoning events or shard events where you have those things, they have a pretty set in place stone for like the amount of points you're going to get. So I would say just be aware of that and do some calculations beforehand about what you're going to be at. One thing that I will say, that although I wouldn't intrinsically look at it at first as like my main source, But if you do find yourself as like, man, I'm very, very close to a point where I feel comfortable, but I'm not entirely sure that I will be able to do it, you could take some time and go farm in like campaign 12-3, farm up some mystery shards while you're farming up some food, maybe getting some silver on the side. And as you get some of those passive shards, you can utilize that. So like you're triple dipping into areas that will prepare you for this fusion, for example. So like those are some ways that I would suggest maybe getting yourself more effectively prepared to make sure that you got what you're going. But of course, I wouldn't only rely on mystery shards. I would look at ancient shards, void shards, and sacred shards and look at your total quantity and like, all right, calculate how many points can I get? Is this within expectations of being able to acquire this epic or fragment, you know, fragments to get the epic I need? If the answer is yes, then you're looking pretty good. If not, then you may want to evaluate one of three options. One, can I farm some more? Maybe do a couple faction wars areas, push some of the star ratings so that you can get maybe, you know, one of the rewards on there. Maybe you haven't finished a brutal campaign or you know, nightmare campaign, and there's a couple shards waiting for there. If you can get 3 stars there, maybe make some efforts towards that so you can stockpile. And then of course, if you know, clan boss, you know, make sure you're saving as much as you can. And then if that's still not enough, option number 2 is don't go for this fusion. You know, sometimes whenever you're going, like we just got out of the new fusion, a lot of people are fatigued on resources. Maybe it may be wise, like, all right, let's take a step back. Let's maybe consider that, you know what, this champion's just not for me, right? Or number 3, if you have the means to, and this is not you know, this is a personal preference type of deal. If you have the means to, then you could spend some money, maybe get some energy, and maybe get some shards just to give yourself that buffer room. As always, this game is for you to play, so I'm not going to tell you or criticize you on whatever decision that so happens to be. Just make the best educated one with the information you have available, okay? And that's the whole purpose of this video. I hope this finds you well, and if, at the end of the day, if this, you know, if you have any questions about this, I'm very excited. Another fusion that was very similar to this was the Brogni fusion, and I remember a lot of people back in the day were saying that that was one of the hardest fusions that they ever participated in. So I'm interested in getting to this for various reasons. For me, I'm gonna go for this, even though I have a strong clan boss team. I would like to showcase to you guys a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different ways that you can develop your champions, including Emic, and make a really, really strong team. So we'll do some clan boss teams if I can get this guy going, as well as being able to showcase maybe him being viable in other areas of the game, like Arena, for example. I'm always looking to further implement and push that, since that's going to be becoming one of my focuses more and more as we progress our account. Developing a team that may incorporate Emic and value with it. Like, think about it, you know, shield growthing and creating shields. Then since Emic does that, who else does that? Maybe Brogni. Maybe get some intrinsic damage from Brogni from being able to just go super shield heavy. So you're super protective, but you're also chunking the enemy because they're attacking you, and you know, Brogni's passive is kicking in. So there's a lot of value that maybe we could see some mix and matching with. It'd be really, really cool to just experiment with him. But you know, if you just want him just to get him, that's never a bad thing. You never know. Down the road, they may buff him, they may nerf him. You never know. And having the champion, there's a saying I go by, is better to have and not need than to need and not have, right? So if you have the means to go for him, why not? If you don't have the needs for him, or don't have the reasons for him, it's completely understandable. You do what's best for your account at the end of the day, and that's the best thing I can incorporate. Anyways, I hope you guys liked this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. Are you going for him? Or if you're not, then, you know, why? I'm curious. And with that being said, always remember, stay ascended.